And one. Well, hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. I got a great question that we generally have the answer to us in our brain, but I really want to unpack this today. And the question is that, you know what? I hear so often that everybody says they can build a relationship. And my question to you today, the listener, is how good are you at building relationships? And what does that look like professionally for you? So I'm honored to be hanging out with Justin Aman. How are you today, my friend?
I'm doing well, Dave. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So you're a client executive at a company called Foresight Benefits. So let's start first with what's Foresight Benefits? Fill us in on what that is.
Yeah, so Foresight benefits, think anything health benefits, what are employees offered at their employer, whether it's health insurance, wellness incentives, wellness programs. We really do encompass that larger gambit of what employers offer their employees for working for them. So.
And looking at your website, Justin, it looked like thinking outside the box was a pretty normal scenario for you guys. That's what how you're trying to approach that, which I love that. Excuse me. I think that's awesome. Um, Obviously, you have to rebuild relationships on a daily basis with people that because they have to trust you, and we'll get into some trust things later. But somebody really has to, when they're talking about benefits, they really have to trust you and your company that you have their best interest in mind. Is trust kind of where a relationship building piece starts for you? Do you see that a lot, that's kind of the starting spot?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's when someone thinks of what we do on a benefits side, it's you make a bunch of money, you organize some stuff, and you help an employer organize their insurance. But at the core of what we do is really, are we helping this company or this individual, this owner, or group of owners, whatever it may be, are we helping them stay financially viable throughout the year? Because as you
Sure.
know, healthcare costs are usually number two, number three, sometimes number one for a business. And so sometimes when we have, and I know we'll dig into a little bit later as far as, how do you manage unhappy stories or that time when that message
Yeah.
isn't great to give. You're really saying, hey, I'm helping you keep your business in business when it really comes down to the pluses and minuses at the end of the day.
And
So
I think,
it's
oh, go ahead.
super
Yep,
important.
keep going. Yeah,
Yep.
no, I think that that's like a big blind spot. Like you said, when I think of benefits as a business owner, sorry. It's only Tuesday, everybody. So we're
Yeah.
just getting started here. So anyway, back to my story. When I hear and when a lot of businesses owners hear the words benefits, they feel like it's going to cost a lot. They feel like, I'm already paying you for a job or blah blah blah. There's a lot of blind spots that are in this world of benefits. But yet I got to believe this is one of those big things that you're seeing, like the employee really looking. That's like a big question, is what are your benefits? That used to be a big question way back in the day. What does that look like now? Can you create a win-win situation for benefits for an employer and an employee?
Yeah, it's a great question, Dave. It's not really the magic bullet, but sort of that magic formula, right? So how do we make sure that everybody wins? How do we make sure
Yeah.
that the employer wins? How do we make sure that the employees win? There are a couple unique strategies you can have. Now, I'm actually giving a talk on this at our up here in Green Bay for our SHRM group next month, talking
Okay.
about sort of the history of and the transition of what's taking place in benefits. And so a lot of time, or what we've seen come up are these high deductible health plans. So basically saying we want, as the employer, we want the employees to have skin in the game. So we want
Sure.
them to feel the financial pinch that we felt as an employer for how long up to this point. And so with that, what we saw was a decline in employee usage. So they said, well, if I'm going to have the bill at 5,000 a year, 10,000 a year, whatever it may be, I'm not going to get engaged in healthcare. So what we've seen be a little bit of help on that end is where you start to tie in some of your HSAs or your health savings accounts, your HRAs, your health reimbursement accounts, to where the fixed cost for the employer with implementing one of those high deductible health plans, that'll be lower on the
Okay.
premium side, at least for a fully insured group. Talking on that side, but um, The fixed costs will be lower for the employer, but you're also giving the employees a little bit of an incentive to say, hey, we want to keep you engaged in your own healthcare. Here are ways that we can help with those costs. And then if they don't use it, then great. Hopefully they didn't have any health concerns. The employee didn't have any health concerns. But if they do
Sure.
use it, there are some good outs to where both can win. It's just one way that we've seen where both can win.
Sure. And I think win-win is obviously a huge advantage, especially in today's marketplace, because let's face it, when somebody's interviewing somebody to for a job, it's kind of like it's like this match of wits. I want as much money if I'm the typical, this is typical, this isn't necessarily right, but typical, I'm sitting there wanting to hire you, I want to pay you as little as possible, and you're sitting there and wanting to get hired and you want to make as much as possible. It feels like a kind of a tug of war, lose lose to start with, and then you bring in this benefits thing, and it can kind of tip the scales. I'm guessing this is the thing that either is exciting and interesting to people, or they're like, hey, no benefits, no this, no, if there's nothing there, that's got to really hurt the chances of an employee getting a decent rock star, because everyone's looking for the rock star, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
we're all looking for that rock star, Justin, but it's just like no one wants to pay for it. And so do you run into a lot of business owners that have that mentality that they're trying to get the rock star without paying for it necessarily?
Yeah, and Dave, that's a great question, and I would say it is so industry specific.
Okay.
So does that engineering firm, do they need top tier engineers, or is it you're running a line and running parts through? And
Sure.
this is just the reality of what happens behind the scenes. This
Yeah.
is not putting any sort of lens on it. And then you have the small time restaurant owner who just wants to do right by their employees and keep good people and help their people out. They may not necessarily even need to offer health insurance, but they want to because they
Sure.
want to give back to the community that's helping them, stay afloat. So it's very, very industry specific, but absolutely that's a big part of it. When you
Yeah.
get into like your government agencies, your school districts, your top end, higher end engineering firms on the industry or industrial side of things, manufacturing side of things, you start to see a lot more of that take place where it's okay. We need to have really competitive plans. We need to have as low cost as possible to the employees because we want to remove any barriers that they have, inconvenience wise on a healthcare setting. Um, but obviously they're still trying to negotiate down those costs as much as possible too. And regardless of what plan design you offer to your people, the general rise of healthcare costs and pharmaceutical costs are just going up so
Sure.
fast. Those costs
Yeah.
are going to go up regardless of what you're doing.
Sure. So how do you then like create this relationship? Because it feels like from day one, it's almost like it's kind of somewhat, confrontational, because I'm trying to get as much out of you and you're trying to, there's just this little outside thing that's not necessarily um fair, but it,
Yep.
it happens. So then we transition into this relationship. So I hire you, you hire me, whatever, right?
Yep.
And now we're working together. And so this is an employer-employee relationship. How do you then strengthen that relationship? What are some of the things that
Yep.
you're finding in your world to kind of strengthen that bond?
Yeah, I think it comes down to sometimes it comes down to the little things. My employer, for example, here at Foresight, obviously we try to practice what we preach. And when I say
Yeah,
try, we really do, being that we're built on this greater cause of trying to affect, individuals' health and longevity and all that, by what we
sure.
do. But I'm incentivized from my leadership to be
Yeah,
active, to work out, to be moving throughout the day, to learning and engaging in my own healthcare. And so what we do, and actually a big part or a big portion of our business is built on that, is to work with employers and say, it's good that you're offering health insurance benefits, but do your employees actually know how to use it? Are
sure.
you providing those ways for your employees to just personally and individually grow? In addition to we really look at insurance as the base level of what we do, and then we really focus on that employee engagement, employee communication
Yeah,
that comes with that. So, I try not to fall back on the old sales adage of, it's if we both feel like we're getting screwed, it's a good deal.
Yeah,
We try not to fall back on that. We really want
sure.
win-win scenarios as best we
Yeah,
can. But the reality is there is some sweat equity that needs to be brought in, and usually it has to come from leadership to say we're investing in you as the employee. Yes, we offer you health insurance benefits. Here's how we offer ways for you to get engaged more in your own health care. Whether
sure.
that's financial incentive, whether it's fun things we can do. Right now, we're working a lot on trying to have fun prizes that we have to get people engaged, and it really can be that simple. It doesn't have to be anything super complicated. It's put a little bit of sweat into it, maybe a little bit of financial incentive into it to get your employees engaged, because that's really how everybody wins in the long run.
Well, and I think I love those words, Justin, of invest in your people, because I feel like a lot of times, I've worked with people over the years, you know, built business owners, and they've kind of like had this hands-off approach of, I had one guy that was like, "Hey, I pay your salary every week. What more do you want?" type of thing. And it just felt like there was a big disconnect there. And that's where you see high turnover, that's where you see burnout. That's where you see quiet quitting. So I'm just curious, when you invest in people, if somebody's like you mentioned, being active, or you mentioned taking care of your physical health, I got to believe that different people really want you to invest in, like me. If I'm an employee, I may have a different strategy on how you can invest in me, as opposed to, let's say you and I worked on the same team for the same company. Your the way that the leadership would invest in you might be different than the way they would invest in me. So, because I sense that there's this one size fits all type thought process of, hey, if money motivates Justin, money's going to motivate Dave. Well, money might motivate me, but it doesn't motivate you, or vice versa. So, do you see good leaders kind of understanding that there's a difference of strategy on for each person on their team, or is it more of a one size fits all that you've seen?
Yeah, I would say the leaders that truly want their employees to succeed will take that time to find some of that out. And the reality is, David, that, there's no magic bullet of I'm going to do this and it's going to hit 90% of my population, 95% of my population.
Yeah,
Usually, and in a general sense, money talks. So that's usually an easy go-to of just saying like, hey, we're going to have a couple small financial incentives.
yeah,
But yeah, you're 100% right though. The reality is, and that's just individuals being individuals.
sure.
My communication pattern is different than your communication pattern, and so how do you find that happy middle ground? And we'll work with employers to say, do you want to survey your employees, see what benefits them? Do you know your employees already? Are there
Yeah,
ways we can get creative around that? And it really does come down to how flexible or how diverse does the employer, the owner, the whoever it is, the leadership team, how diverse do they want to be with their incentive program? But we really do have a lot of opportunity to get as creative as we want to be. Um,
okay,
but yeah, I would say there's no magic blanket. Usually that even if it's like, hey, if you do this many steps per day for the next year, you're going to get a day of PTO, 2 days of PTO. Maybe someone values time off more. Um,
sure.
they're really just trying to find some of those unique ways that we can do that to incentivize, and it's very unique per population.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point. And I think just exactly what you said, again, use whatever. If you do 10,000 steps a day for 6 months, whatever, right? You
Yep.
have a goal. Now you might, because you're so involved in kids sports and all that, you might end up much rather have that one day of PTO, where
Yeah.
I might much rather have $500 or whatever,
Yep.
whatever that is. And I think that's what's really helpful, is to realize that your team is made up of different human beings that each are motivated differently. That's why we do a ton of work with DISC with teams, because there's a page in your assessment, because again, let's face it, we both get hired on the same day for whatever job we're doing. And they're generally not going to say, all right, Justin, what in the world motivates you? Dave, what motivates you? They just kind of make the assumption that it's all the same motivation. And I love the fact that there's a page in your assessment that says what motivates you, and you can list that out. Do you see that one size fits all as a negative? Because I do, but I might be a huge blind spot for me. So I'm just curious if you're trying to help people see that there's multiple different personalities and motivators in this thing.
Yeah, I would say, the one size fits all approach isn't, I wouldn't look at it as much of a negative as it is the alternative. You have to somewhat balance how much time and stuff do you invest in trying to really pinpoint down to the nitty gritty of, oh, well, Sally in accounting is motivated by this. We need to make sure that we branch off an entire incentivization structure for that one person. And that's
Yeah,
not being cold or brash or anything like that. That's just trying to find the balance of how
sure.
do we make sure that employers find success in what they're doing,
Yeah,
without diverting so much resources to it. You know, it's kind of a catch 22 of, we want to make sure that we're speaking to our employees directly, but we got to
sure.
make sure that we're capturing as much as we can without hurting ourselves by going to each, obviously company size matters too.
Right.
You have a 300 employee company. That's much more difficult than it is for
Yeah.
a 10-person company.
Yeah.
So,
No,
yeah,
yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I didn't even think of that because I always have this proverbial 10-person
sure.
company in my brain just for easy math, right? And so, like, if you have 300 people, that is something that obviously it's very difficult to know everybody's ins and outs. The reality is, I'm guessing though, the more you know about your team, the more engagement you're going to see, longevity's going to be there, the motivation's going to be there, the energy. So that's where I feel like, yeah, I think that's a great concept of finding that balance, because you might not be able to learn 300 people's first name, their kids' names, their spouses, all that you would normally be able to do pretty easy in a 10-person group. So,
You
um,
you
one, go
you
ahead.
would be surprised though. Some of those owners do get pretty into it, and I would say those are,
Yeah,
like you said though, those are the companies that are going to be a little bit more successful. Are the ones that don't have detached owners, the ones that are part of it. They want to see the investment in it. They want to see it succeed and grow.
yeah.
So yeah, to your point though, I think the ones that we see the more success with are the ones that do take that time though to really know their people.
That's a good point. So yeah, so one question, and then we're going to take a break. We talk about like hard discussions. These are some of these things are kind of difficult to talk about because especially like in healthcare, and there's all these HIPAA laws and there's all this stuff that like when I own my business, I just put my hands in my air, put the
Mhm.
hands in the air and let the insurance people, let the professionals take care of that, because the last thing I want to do is, say something I shouldn't say, offend somebody somehow with something. So, how do you navigate these hard discussions? Because, hey, I'm a business owner. There's a ton of business owners listening right now on this, Justin, what do we tell them? How do you have that hard discussion, or what do you do in that scenario? If you, let's say you're big enough but you don't have an HR, HR department that knows the ins and outs of that. What options do you have?
Yeah. So, Dave, I think one thing we could do is have a a very real example of how this usually plays out. Let's say we have a group who, they're small enough to be on the fully insured side, which means they don't really know what's going on with their people. They're not getting any data. They're not paying for that, so they don't see what's going on.
Yeah,
Then it comes renewal time, and I would say this, at least in my direct purview, this is one of the most difficult conversations to have. Is that now their insurance renewal is a 75%, 80%, whatever it may be, which is huge for a company. And so then they come back to us and say, well, what are we going to do about it? And I would say that our approach here is, and I would say fairly unique from the time that I've spent in the industry. As far as, when we bring people on, we don't take that trust lightly. We take that trust very personally,
sure.
and we treat them just like they're one of us, here in the trenches on this side of the business, like, they're one of our family. There's someone here because when they hurt, we hurt too, because especially when it's tough for us to find some solutions for that. because that is the reality of the system that we have, is that it can come down to someone getting a really large renewal. We have to then deliver that message, but then we get to work on our end saying, what are we going to do about it?
Sure.
And so it's turning over every stone. It's doing whatever we can to find solutions. And sometimes at the end of the day, the reality comes back, which, I don't think a lot of people in my role would say, but it is the reality, is that sometimes we don't have a great solution for it, at least right at this time. There may be
Yeah.
ways we can put a band-aid on it until we get to that next year, and then reassess and go from there. But when it comes down to it, it's trying to treat those conversations with delicacy, and knowing that when they hurt, we hurt too. And trying to do what we can to say, if this was my mom, if this was my dad, if this was my brother, how would I want to deliver this message? But then
Yeah.
also, how hard will I work to make sure that my mom isn't financially hurting, to make sure that my family isn't financially hurting? What would I do to make sure that that doesn't happen? And try to find solutions around that. But that's how
Yeah.
we approach it.
Well, and I love the preventative things that you talked about before, because I don't think a lot of people make those connections, like 10,000 steps equals better health, equals lower insurance, equals, right? I don't think we, as a lot of times, I remember I was on a Zoom call with somebody and I kept seeing them do this, they're bobbing up and down. And finally, I'm like, what is
Yep.
going on? She's like, oh, I'm on a treadmill, a walking treadmill while I'm like, that's brilliant. I'm like, that's
Yep.
so cool. I mean, if it wasn't so distracting, her going up and down like
Yep.
that, it was, but I
A
mean,
little bit of
I'm like,
motion sickness.
yeah, exactly, right. But I'm like, man, this is brilliant to think about this, because there's more and more of the research showing the importance of walking and how bad sitting is for us as humans. So, I lied. One more question and then we'll take the break. Do
Yeah.
you get into a lot of that research of understanding like what is better for, like I stand a lot, like I'm standing now and I pretty much stand all day at my standing desk. I have one that goes up and down. It just feels better, but I
Yep.
just feel more like engaged in my day. There's just some psychological things, but physically, do you guys get into a lot of that so you can inform
Sure.
your business owners some of the things that they can help their team with?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, everybody references the 10,000 steps, right? Like that was
Yeah,
the gold standard of step,
right?
for how long, whoever
Means
created that,
nothing.
Mr. 10,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. We actually have some recent research that says 6,500 is actually, like, there's no your gains or your increase in return between 6,500 and 10,000 is actually so minimal, that we
Okay.
try to get people to 6,500 to begin with, and that's a much more achievable goal too.
Sure.
And Dave, being a fitness guy from a long time ago, one thing I learned is that everybody thinks they have the human body figured out until the next article gets written and rewrites what everyone says.
Sure.
I've done everything from CrossFit to physique shows to, I was even in a cage fight in college. We don't need to get into that. That's the next podcast.
Wow. Oh,
Yeah,
that's a different
yeah,
day, but holy, you gotta have pictures of that one. I will.
yeah. I have an old grainy video that was taken a long time ago.
There you go.
But what I have settled on is that, and I love it. So Sarah Troop, she runs our motion connected side of the business. She phrased it really well one time. She said, "There's no substitute for physical movement. There
Sure.
really is no better thing than just
Yeah.
being active." And the one thing I've learned over the years, especially all the competitive side of fitness, is that something is always better than nothing.
Sure.
Don't let yourself get down into that trench of, oh man, well, it's only 15 minutes today. Well, 15 minutes is better than 0 minutes. It's better than
Yeah.
14 minutes, so
Yeah.
do whatever you can. A lot of it comes down to the diet side. We are not set up for success in this society as far as really healthy living and cost effectiveness. So, trying to do what you can to eat healthy. But Dave, I love how you mentioned, like, I don't know if standing works, but I feel better doing it. So by
Yeah.
default, that means that it does work, because
Right.
it puts you in a better headspace. There's a lot to be said for, where the mind is at, the body will follow. And so
Sure.
if you're feeling good, that means that confidence is up. That means that cortisol levels are down, which is that nasty stress hormone that gets you. And so, by default, whatever niche you find that helps you feel better,
Yeah.
is effective. So,
Yeah. As long as
yeah.
it's not Doritos, right?
I don't know. They have like the naked Doritos now, right? They don't have the
The
red dye
whole
in them
bag
anymore,
of
so they're
Doritos.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
maybe
Cool.
just
Well,
half
we're
a
gonna
bag.
take yeah, half a bag. There you go. We're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to kind of ask a legal question. We'll see if you know the answer. So we'll be right back. Welcome back. Honored to be hanging out with Justin Aman, and he is the client executive for Foresight Benefits. And my question is, like, we're talking about encouraging business owners to kind of take an active interest in their team's health. It feels like there might be a line, though, that we have to be really careful of legally. Do you guys address that? Do you get involved with that? Do you have any words of wisdom for somebody that's listening? Because I could see I would go like I would get right to that edge and probably cross it and not even know that I was crossing it, just purely out of concern for my team rather than, thinking I'm doing something wrong. How does that whole thing work for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the easiest way to address that and how I've seen play out in practice is that um, you have to assume that by default, you're going to have some form of catastrophic health event that's happening. Whether it's, Tina in HR has cancer, whether it's, John in accounting has, some big concern, health scare come up, which is it's a double negative effect because not only are those costs and those dollar signs that you see pop up that you're going to have to address as the employer, but that
Sure.
person's life has completely changed. That person's life is there for the worse. And so, how do you, from a legal aspect, try to address John in accounting and try to get him the help he needs, or to try to
Yeah.
prevent that in the first place? And early in my healthcare career, a lot of what we did when we worked with employers was really try to paint the picture of we're just trying to remove barriers. So we cannot force any of our people to do whatever they want in the healthcare system. We can't tell them they have to go in, but
Yeah.
we can incentivize them. And some employers, carry the stick versus the carrot. To
Sure.
say, hey, if you don't take care of this or if you don't stop smoking, you're going to have to pay a little bit more for your premiums. I think
Yeah.
some of those things are justified and fair, depending on where it's at, because the employer, yes, doesn't want someone who's at a higher risk of, you know, getting one of these more costly diseases, which are,
Sure.
very, very life changing.
Yeah.
Um, but they're the ones paying the bill too, so they're allowed to say like, hey, do this, or else you're going to pay more. But I really try to encourage looking at saying, let's try to remove barriers and let's try to open up access to different ways to get our teams to a place of success. And so some of that is, looking a little bit at the law of large numbers, depending on whether we're a 50 life group or a 500 life group. It's this X percentage that someone's gonna have this pop up on their medical, sheet. It's, this percentage of us probably is dealing with pre-diabetes. This percentage of us, maybe smokers. And so trying to find ways to say, we're not going to specifically point you out and call you out, but we
Okay.
are going to make sure that you have every tool necessary
Okay.
to find success. And so
So
it's,
So if
yeah.
you do just a follow up on that, if you do like a more generic, broad approach to the group rather than individuals, you're safer. It sounds like what you're saying then, Justin. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say that's fair.
Okay.
When we get into the self-funded realm, it's a little bit different. We can address a little bit more, and we can, we have a couple more levers that we can pull because that employer is acting as essentially as the insurance carrier, the insurance company. So it's a little bit different that way. But the majority of groups, especially up in this area, are going to be smaller groups that that those are the tools that they have. We're actually creating a cost calculator that we're branding as the calculation of the cost of doing nothing, and trying to look at how do you, and even back as a fitness guy, it was how do I show value for something that I prevent.
Yeah.
How do I say, hey, if you come to the gym 2 times a week and work out with me as a trainer,
Yeah.
I'm going to help you prevent X amount of PT visits later on because you're taking care of yourself here. And I'm going to prevent the heart attack that never happened because you were on the treadmill or you were working out and
Sure.
getting your heart healthier. Or I'm going to excuse me, I'm going to prevent the knee surgery because you lost 100 pounds. How do you show or calculate that value? And we're actually working on finalizing that up right now to say we can look at a lot of these to say let's just look at what a cost of a knee replacement is. Let's look at
Sure,
what the cost of a stage 4 cancer is to say, hey, if we would have caught this earlier, if we would have incentivized preventive screenings with our employees, we
sure.
may have caught this, a year ago versus now, and now we're in a much, much different boat than what
Gotcha.
it was a year ago. So,
Sure.
yeah, that's one way we
That's
look at
awesome.
it.
And I'm thinking that like building trust, we hinted at it before, but like there's got to be this trust built between everybody, the insurance world, the people there, the employees, the employers. I mean, how do you build that trust with people? Because like you have this idea and what you're thinking and I have an idea that I'm thinking that might be different. Like, let's just say somebody sits at their desk, like all day. That's, they're a computer programmer or whatever. They're 90% of their day is sitting at a desk. So here we come along, you come along, and let's say I'm the employer, and you come along and say, hey, maybe you should give that guy or girl a walk break or something. I mean, that takes a lot because now I'm thinking dollar signs like, well, she's not going to be working, she's
Yep.
going to be walking around, blah, blah, blah. There's got to be like this underlying trust that starts there. How do you guys build that? Because that just seems to be the hardest place to start is you got to somehow build
Yeah.
that trust.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to shy away from, changing human behavior and trying to get someone to, especially on the fitness side, being a part of that industry for so long.
Yeah,
Um, the people that want to do it will do it. The people that don't do it, will generally not do it unless they're incentivized or encouraged or something, to say, hey,
yeah,
you got to take care of yourselves. And I would say too, don't ever short the effectiveness of sweat equity from leadership.
okay,
And when I say that, it's, hey, we know our IT department as a whole doesn't move a whole lot. We're going to say, hey, you guys get a half-hour break. Leadership's going to come down with you and spend some time with you, and we're all going to go for a walk. We did that at my old employer. It was, leadership from the top down, the top, very, very top, came down and said, hey, we're going to do this walk. They tied it into a cause of, we're walking for um, sorry, I'm a huge Office fan, so anytime I think about walks, I think about was it rabies awareness? What did Michael Scott do with the paper company that he wanted to walk for that? But if you're not an Office fan, you don't get that. That's okay.
yeah, yeah,
But finding ways just to be engaged, to be visible, to be active. I
sure,
think people feel like they're on an island when the big man in the tall tower is just telling me what to do, but I don't see him out here doing it. I don't see him
yeah,
coming around and telling the importance of it.
yeah,
Um, and I do think there's a lot of value there just to say, even if it's, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it may be, I would argue that the cost of that 15 to 20 minutes of, no work is more important than the $300,000, cancer claim that happened because this person wasn't investing in their own health. So
sure.
that's how I choose to look at it and try to get everyone on board with.
And that's the thing is if I don't trust what you just said, I mean, a $300,000 claim in my mind, simple mind, you got to pay that. I don't have to pay that. But you forget about all the things that come along. It's like a cost of a poor hire.
Yep.
Most people don't have any clue that how expensive it is to have somebody to, constant turnover. They just think
Yep.
it's part of life. And the reality is it's way worse for your company. I'm guessing back to your point, somebody in HR, somebody in accounting has a debilitating cancer, something, I know when I had my heart attack last year, it was, a situation where I was off for 4 weeks where there was no work being done. So there was no income. I mean, there was nothing, right? And
Yep.
again, I totally get that piece, but I think that's a big blind spot, I'm guessing, for a lot of business owners. They don't see the cost that's to them. Are
Yep.
you seeing that they kind of don't really understand the cost to their company if they don't, encourage the health of their team?
Yeah, I would say it depends on the employer. Some get it, some understand. When we talk directly, especially about a fully insured group, it's, well, I don't have to worry about that. The employee is their portion, the insurance carrier picks up the rest.
Yeah.
But the downstream effects of that are, all right, the insurance carrier picked up that. They're not going to keep that as just oh well, we just paid it out of goodwill.
Yeah.
That it doesn't work that way. At some point, the employer will have to either true up or get settled up there, especially if it's an ongoing thing.
Sure.
Cancer is an easy example of ongoing treatments. Transplants are another one, which transplants are a whole separate issue. But some of these conditions that pop up,
Yeah.
the dollar signs don't stop once that event happens. And so, yes, the employee paid their part, the carrier pays our part. But when that next renewal comes around, at some point, somebody will have to pay because the reality is that the house never loses.
Sure.
So we try to find some of those unique times. But even a very real example of encouraging fitness is that when I worked at a gym when I was a kid, what a kid, I think it was 23, kid
Yeah.
enough,
Yeah.
when I was sort
Definitely.
of younger.
I was younger. Yep.
In my younger years. We
Yep.
had a guy who was at the track every single day. He ran around, just an older retired gentleman. He ran around, and all of a sudden, we got the call on the radio that there was the code red, or I can't remember what we called it at the time, but
Sure.
that somebody was down, and we needed to go help them. And seeing somebody actually breathe their last breath is a very real reality check of,
Sure.
like, seeing that happen. Is quite an awakening moment of how important everything that what we do is, because
Yeah.
life is so fragile and precious. But the fact that he ran around so much and he walked a lot, I think he was back in the gym like the next week.
Yeah.
His heart was in such good shape outside of that event that he had.
Yeah.
His recovery time was next to nothing. His downstream effects were next to nothing because of how healthy he was. And
Sure.
then you have the opposite effect of my father-in-law, who didn't take care of himself, had a hard event that happened, and now he's in long-term care for the rest of his life. So, you have two very different extremes of somebody who took care of themselves before and then somebody who didn't. So
Yeah.
that's the
And
base purpose of what we do.
no, absolutely. And that's hard as we start to come in for a landing today on this. That's hard for an employer to kind of sit back and just let it happen. I
Yep.
don't know, like for me, I'd love to be, I love investing in people. And so I would be trying to find ways to get people to move around, get up and walk around, for whatever it is, whatever the behavior modification that you want to do. I think there's definitely, it does take trust, but I think at the end of the day, it's a win-win. Everybody wins when everybody's healthy on the team, because when there's a chronic illness or somebody's off more than they're at work, I mean, it hurts the customer, it hurts the company, it hurts the person that's going through it. So
Yep.
I can see where this is, benefits are like they feel on the surface as an expense, but as we do this dive that we did today, I start to realize, like, oh my gosh, we really need to, X, Y, and Z, whatever those are. So I totally
Yep.
appreciate that piece. And it goes all the way back to what we said at the beginning, is it really, if you don't have a relationship with your team, you're going to struggle with them believing you, listening to you, respecting you. So you can go around and bark orders and do the old, adage of the beatings will continue until morale improves type thing. You
Yep.
can try that, but it just isn't working anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like, what would your tip of the day be today for somebody listening?
Yeah.
Maybe it's something we covered, maybe it's something we haven't yet, but as we land this plane today, what would your tip of the day be today?
Yeah, and then it's you try to think about all the different things that you learn over the years, and
Yeah,
what's one way you can kind of encapsulate all of that. And I think the one thing that I think about that applies, not only in my role directly, but what I encourage to those around me, what I talk about with our business owners, when they're interacting with their own teams, just be genuine. Um, find what you're passionate about. And if you're passionate about your business, that means you have to be passionate about your people.
yeah,
You can't have that short-sightedness. And so just try to be genuine whenever you do something. Be a very real person. And that's how I try to live my life and encourage all those around me to live too.
That, that's awesome. And I think so weird when you said that because the first thing that popped into my mind about being genuine is being able to like look somebody in the eye. And
Mhm.
I realize how many interactions there are in a day with other people that they never really stop and look at you in the eye and listen and they really like, absorb what's going on. It's kind of like two ships passing in the night and they just kind of,
Yep.
hey, how's it going? And they really don't look at each other. And I think that is so interesting when an employer takes an active interest in an employee and is genuine about it, like you said. That's
Yep.
just really powerful. And I don't even think we know all the positive that comes out of that piece.
Yep.
So great spot for us to land today is to be genuine in what you're doing. This was a great conversation, Justin. If people want to learn more about Foresight benefits, or they want to reach out and connect with you, maybe they have a question about something that we didn't cover today, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah, so I have no shyness about how to get in contact with me. So my first initial J and Eamon, my last name at foresightbenefits.com is my email. I'm more than happy to give out my cell phone as well.
Sure.
If anybody wants
Whatever
that.
you want. Hey, if you want
Yes.
people calling you at midnight, man, you go ahead, whatever works.
And Dave, it's part of the gig. I didn't
Yeah,
enter this
exactly.
industry with any shyness about it. Nine eight
Exactly.
nine 240 0097 is my cell. I encourage anyone and everyone to reach out. Always looking for good relationships, and I do what I enjoy most about what I do is I feel like I'm in a spot, especially with business owners and just the community in general of being able to be a resource. And so that's really what my purpose is out here is helping others succeed, and always happy to do that in any way, shape, or form. So,
And give out that email one more time, Justin.
yep. So J Aman, so JAMAN at foresightbenefits.com.
And Foresight is Forsite.
That's correct.
Correct.
Yep.
Foresightbenefits.com. J.
Yep.
Amen at foresightbenefits.com. Awesome. Well, thank
Yep.
you so much for this. This was fun to kind of peel back this because, like I said, I just on the surface think of benefits and I think, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
what's it going to cost? And I'm guessing a lot of people listening had that thought process when we started, and hopefully by now there's at least a little bit more understanding about how this is a win-win and about how really to invest in your team is really means a lot of different things. We talk about that a lot in investing in your team. Today we're talking about ways to invest in their health and in their safety and in their, actual well-being. So thank you for unpacking this. And I can't wait to see where you go next and where Foresight goes. And that sounds like a fun little calculator to when is that thing scheduled to be out?
I think we're just putting the finishing touches on it. So we're trying to make just a couple tweaks. It's a little bit of trying to find, what are the most common conditions that we see pop up that are preventable.
Sure.
And sometimes those are changing. There's a little bit of a fluctuating landscape there. But how do we make sure that when we talk with a group of saying, hey, if you do nothing, here are the chances in the next 3 4
Yeah.
5 years of what you're going to see. Just a couple tweaks on the back end formulas is all, but I would love
Sure.
to chat with anyone that would be interested in hearing more about it.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Justin, for carving out part of your day to hang with us. And look forward again to seeing where you go next.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Dave. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate talking to you today.